What's up guys, and welcome back to the first rugby video of the year. So much is going to happen this year in World Rugby and I'm excited for it. We got Six Nations, Super Rugby, Rugby Championship, all the good stuff and great things about rugby, end of year tour, the game everyone's been talking about, New Zealand versus England. It's going to be a humdinger of a year and I can't wait for it to kick off in February. But today I read an article that I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions with you guys on it and just discuss the 5 points that this gentleman wrote about. And the topic is top 5 Rugby Union Wishes for 2018. Now he's written this discussing what he thinks he wants and that company, and it was written by a chap called Steve Wright. So let's get to it for the first point. Top 5 Rugby Union Wishes for 2018 is Scotland wins the Six Nations. Now his reasoning, he says here, the health of rugby in the Northern Hemisphere would be better off if Scotland wins the 2018 Six Nations. Now I get where he's coming from because we've got the top teams. We've got England and Ireland pretty much top right. France has a dismal year. Wales has got the injuries. So for me, it's pretty much a standout between England and Ireland. But then we had Scotland. Now, Scotland had a great end of year season and pretty much a good year overall. So I can see where he's coming from. Having a team that hasn't won in many years, or I'm not sure if they actually have won the Six Nations, but a team like Scotland to win will do so much wonders because it's just showing how much rugby is developing all over the world. Because if we had to look at Scotland maybe 10 years ago, we would have not been talking about, can they win the Six Nations kind of thing. Yes, they've had their good moments and their sparks in time, but can they win the Six Nations? So that to me is a very good point. And I wouldn't be sad if Scotland wins. It would be great for World Rugby, but we'll have to wait and see next month when Six Nations kicks off. His second point is England versus New Zealand is as advertised. Now his point here, he says Rugby Union needs this match to deliver on the promise it holds. Now, as I said in the intro here, it's a game that we're all talking about. I said it in a previous video where I discussed who I think will win between the two later this year. It's a game that everyone wants to see. We want to see England versus New Zealand because it's the two top teams in the world. I know a lot of you think Ireland are, and Ireland have had great success over this previous year. But this is the game. It's Eddie Jones versus Steve Hansen. It's England versus New Zealand. It's the two number 1 and 2 versus each other. And I agree with this point. We want to see build in the gees, as everyone's talking about. I, as a neutral here, who obviously is a South African, I want to see an incredible game where both teams are giving it their absolute all and are fighting till the absolute death to pick up a win. So definitely is a big one for this year. Then he's got in the next point, fewer concussions marring the game. He says there are too many for the game to sustain the rate at which players are going down. Whatever the solution to this issue is, we need to find it quickly before stars are put on the shelf forever because of repeated impacts to the head. Now if we look at it, you could have a junior, for example, a good example of this is Patrick Lambie. This player has the potential to have been one of South Africa's greatest fly-offs. Talented player, tactical kicking, place kicking, skill level, ball handling, everything. He had it all. But unfortunately, too many concussions. When he came to the Sharks or to the Springboks, the question we always asked ourselves, or I asked amongst my friends, how long is he going to last? Is he going to last this game? Is he going to last a season? And that is the trick here. So definitely agree with fewer concussions and marrying the game. They need to find ways to do it. I don't know how. Reduce maybe more, make the rules stricter, but it's going to be tough because you're taking away so much from the game. But it's definitely something that needs to be worked on because we don't want great stars like a Patrick Lambie or younger players like a Barrett, even in his prime, lose out on the opportunity of playing for their country and international rugby and showing the world who the greatest is. Then the second point was, it says an Australian team wins the rugby Super Rugby title. This was his fourth wish for this year. His point of it is, he says, it just feels like Australian rugby needs this. Of course, big nations in turmoil, it can be argued that Australia fared the worst in 2017. He said France may have had a miserable international team, but the domestic league is the envy of most of the world. Then he goes on to say South Africa were poor as a nation in 2017, but the Lions were in the Super Rugby final. So true. And put together a dominant year. And then he also said, excuse the plane in South Africa. He said Australia had nothing going for them in the Super Rugby, which is true. So I do get where he's coming from. If the Brumbies or the Tars can like spark and give a bit of a challenge, it will be great for World Rugby. It really will, because it just shows that the teams are on the rise. We saw it in Australia towards the end of their tour. Yes, they had their up and down of the games, but they were definitely on the rise. If we look at where they started off in Super Rugby, where the Brumbies shouldn't have even been in the top four, they just were there because they were top of their league. If we look at that, we saw improvement, and I hope for Australia's sake, because a lot of you guys watching are from Australia. I hope that Australian rugby gets better, and it's a valid point. An Australian team wins the Super Rugby. It's one of his fourth wish. Then number 5, a 6-nation reboot is revealed. Now what he says the way the rugby union is structured means that countries just cannot progress beyond the given talent tier level. It is not right that a union puts in the work to improve, with Georgia being an obvious example there. Yet finds their progression stop dead because they aren't invited to the table. He says, I don't know if promotion relegation game is the answer, or if a different system with multiple groups should be implemented. If we look at the 6 Nations has history. The Rugby Championship or Tri-Nations in the past has history. I'm going to add Tri-Nations into this because it is a massive tournament of the year with the 6 Nations. Personally, if we look at Italy, they're not the greatest team in the world, but they're not the worst. But any team on the bottom of a log should play relegation games to see who can get in. So they have a little tournament with the lower tier teams, and the winner of that tournament plays like Italy in this case for 6 Nations, or Argentina in the case of the Rugby Championship. For Argentina's side, maybe play against the Pacific Island teams like a Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, all those teams around that side of the world, and hopefully, well, then we can see how it will all turn out. Will Argentina get kicked out, and so on and so on. It's sad, I know, for Argentinian fans and supporters, but to me it's a good way to develop rugby. So I agree with that point. Something needs to happen so these teams that are improving, like a Georgia, get the opportunity to play. Because if Georgia play Italy, they might not win this year or next year, but they could win the year after. They could win in like a World Cup type of event. So if they carry that momentum on into a relegation game, it's definitely worth talking about. And I think it's a valid point that Steve has made here, and I couldn't agree more. And I think the same thing should be implemented in Rugby Championship. If Argentina or South Africa or Australia or New Zealand, doubt that will ever happen, on the bottom of the log, they need to play a relegation game to see if they can stay or if they get kicked out and be replaced like a team like Fiji. And then the same goes for the 6 Nations, like Georgia, maybe USA, and all those other teams, because it just gives them the opportunity to develop and get better. And I think for growth, it's going to be an awesome impact for World Rugby. So that's my thoughts on this article. I thought it was a great article. I'm going to leave the link below because he goes on into a bit more detail. I just took some key notes of this article, but let's just quickly have a recap. So wish number 1, Scotland wins the 6 Nations. Wish number 2, England versus New Zealand is as advertised. Wish number 3, fewer concussions marrying the game. Wish number 4, an Australian team wins the Super Rugby. And wish number 5, a 6 Nations reboot is revealed. I thought that was a great article and I wanted to comment. So let me know your thoughts down below. do you agree with those 5 wishes? And what would you maybe insert instead, or replace a wish with that, or your top 5 wishes? Let me know in the comments down below, because I think there's some valid points to this thing, and I'm interested to hear your guys' opinions, and we can continue this discussion in the comments down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to smash that thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel so you can keep up to date with all future uploads. We have a big month in February, 6 Nations and Super Rugby kicking off, and I can't wait to do predictions and recap videos with you guys. And until next time, guys, stay safe and never give up. Cheers.